Welcome back. Well, as we look ahead to the year, around 20 million people in our country can expect to have not enough food for themselves and their families. That's despite the fact that our farmers are expected to produce big harvests once again because there was so much rain during December. At the same time, it's estimated that around 10 million tons of food is wasted in our country every year. Alan Browde is the CEO and founder of SA Harvest. Alan, good afternoon to you. 10 million tons of food is a huge amount, literally half a ton per person who goes hungry. Why is so much food wasted?
So, hi Stephen, and thanks so much for having me on the show. Food goes wasted for various reasons. Obviously, there's food wasted in production, a normal event. But a lot of food goes wasted unnecessarily because of, one is because of stipulations by retailers and by big branders that food has to look a specific way. So if a carrot has a little kink in it and is perfect food, it won't be accepted by retailers because that's not what their customers want. Take for example beans. If you go into a bean factory, which I was in recently, it's quite unbelievable to see millions of beans rejected, either because they're just the wrong size by a millimeter or so, or they have a speck on them, and they're rejected and sold on to farmers to feed pigs, and human beings who are struggling to eat do not get that. So it's a problem. The 10 million tons is about a third of our production, and that's pretty standard throughout the world.
It is amazing when you think about it. I mean, there must be other ways to do this. If the beans can, the rejected beans can be kept for pigs, they can surely be kept for humans. Now, that might work for beans. It might be a bit more difficult for your average lettuce, for example, because it goes off so quickly.
Yeah. So, absolutely. I mean, look, from our perspective, at SA Harvest, just to give you a little bit of background, our mission is to end hunger in South Africa. And we do that with a sort of three-legged strategy. The first is charity, where we rescue all this food that would have gone to waste. This year alone, we just reached our 20 millionth meal, and we do that through the food rescue. But at the end of the day, we've got to understand that charity, on the basis that we do it while absolutely crucial in our country, the NGO space altogether stops people from dying in huge quantities from starvation. So we have to do that, but it won't end hunger. And to get to your point, it's the systemic interventions, the interventions that change the system, that help alter the system, that would help create entrepreneurial initiatives amongst the people who are receiving food in a very undignified way. This will make the change. We have to get our government to become more involved in all the systemic things that can be done. And it's not a pipe dream. So I believe that if we all got behind these systemic issues and systemic initiatives, we'd be able to make a huge difference in just a short time.
People will often look back at the history of our country and say, since around 1990, 1994, so many things have changed so dramatically and good. But one thing which has been incredibly persistent is stunting in children. I think the United Nations, the latest figure I can see, is they believe around 27% of our children are stunted, not receiving enough food as they grow up. And that figure's been roughly the same, or nearly one-third of our children, for possibly the last 30 years. So much has changed in our society. You could probably argue that food is cheaper now, or certainly before the pandemic was cheaper then than it was during the 1980s. And yet that figure, 27% of our children are stunted, it's utterly amazing, especially when you consider how much more that we pay out in social grants now.
Yeah, so Stephen, people don't realize that this is catastrophic. We're talking about millions of children, South African children, going to sleep hungry every night. Now, any parent with one child going to sleep hungry in their home is terribly painful. It's difficult to imagine so many millions of our children going to sleep now hungry. So one of the things we have to recognize from a government perspective is, and I agree with you, there have been some unbelievable changes in our country. Anybody like myself who grew up in the apartheid era recognizes that there's just been massive changes. But at the same time, there have been things that have been left behind, which should have been dealt with. Now, when the ANC came into power, their big benefactors, World Bank, other countries and so on, made sure that the sort of libertarian capitalist approach had to be in place. That was one of the stipulations. And as a result of that, the ANC withdrew from any intervention in the food chain. And what happens then is that the powerful get more powerful and the rich get richer. We know that adage. And as a result of that, there's tremendous downward pressure on the prices from the farmers. So, for example, the small farmers got an absolute bashing. They were annihilated. And the ability for people, poorer people, to have access to nutritious, affordable food near them is knocked out. So they're having to buy at huge margins from retailers that are often not near to them. And that's one of the problems. We need our government to intervene to make sure there's some sort of price control and some sort of ability for people to gain access to nutritious food in areas that are around them. I mean, we have an excellent example. We're starting our fourth branch in Lusikisiki in the Eastern Cape, where there's obviously a beautiful countryside, but terrible, terrible conditions for food. And when you go to Lusikisiki, what you see is retail trucks. That's what you see in the street. Huge retail trucks. And that's about all through the one main street in Lusikisiki. While people from the sort of surrounding areas, the hinterland of this little town, have to schlep in to this town every day under great stress, buy at great extra margin because of transport costs and so on, and then go home, not really in organized transport, and it's terrible suffering. So what we have to do is start to reorganize the infrastructure to make people have this access to good, nutritious food near them.
Alan, we know that food prices went up dramatically last year, and they could well continue to go up. Food price inflation is still expected to be high. We're expecting the situation to get worse, and for you to help give people food, it's probably going to get harder as well.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. We have seen significant inflation, and of course inflation causes more and more hunger. So on that basis, we have to be able to deliver to more and more people, more and more NGOs who feed people, because we deliver in bulk. So yes, it is going to be more difficult. There's no doubt about that. And we have to work within those parameters. And it's difficult to do so, but we will continue to do it because the requirement is an absolute necessity in our